For 150 years, an ordinary, forgotten photograph sat stored in an attic. 7 people, dressed in their finest clothes, frozen in time, posed in an elegant Victorian living room somewhere in Mississippi in 1873. It was a formal family portrait like thousands of others from that era, the kind you glance at quickly in a museum and move past without a second thought. But photographs don't lie. They capture everything, even the things we aren't meant to see. In the corner of this image, almost invisible, a small child sits on an ornate rug, distracted, playing with something while the rest of her family holds perfectly still for the camera. For over a century, nobody paid attention to that little girl. No one wondered what she was doing. No one looked closely at the object in her small hands. That is, until 2023, when a routine examination by a historian uncovered something that should have been impossible, something that left him utterly perplexed. What was that child holding? If you're interested in the secrets history has tried to bury, subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. And if this mystery captivates you, show your support with a like. Now, let's uncover the truth hidden in this photograph for 150 years. November 2023, Philadelphia. An estate lawyer's office processes the belongings of a woman who died at 103 years old. Among her possessions, one unmarked envelope containing a single photograph. Dr. Marcus Reed, professor of African American history at Georgetown University, regularly receives unusual artifacts. But when he opens this particular envelope on a gray Tuesday morning, he has no idea he's holding evidence of one of the most dangerous secrets of the Reconstruction era. The daguerreotype is in remarkable condition. 7 people, a black family. The image is dated May 1873, taken at J. Thompson Studio in Natchez, Mississippi. What immediately captures Marcus's attention isn't the people, it's the room they're standing in. This is extraordinary, Marcus mutters to himself, adjusting his examination lamp. The setting is lavish, velvet curtains frame tall windows, an ornate grandfather clock stands in the corner, Persian rugs cover polished wooden floors, and oil paintings hang on walls covered in expensive Victorian wallpaper. The furniture alone would have cost more than most families earned in a year. For a black family to possess this level of wealth in Mississippi in 1873, only 8 years after the Civil War, in the heart of the former Confederacy, was not just rare, it was almost impossible. Marcus begins his standard documentation. He photographs the image from multiple angles, notes the studio mark, and searches for any identifying information. The family members are dressed impeccably. The adults stand with dignified posture. 3 teenagers stand behind them, formal and serious. 2 younger children sit on an elaborate settee. Then he notices the 7th person. In the lower right corner, partially out of frame, sits a little girl. She can't be more than 3 or 4 years old. Unlike everyone else frozen in perfect stillness for the long exposure time required by 1870s photography, this child is slightly blurred. She's moving. Her head is tilted downward, her attention completely absorbed by something in her lap. Marcus leans closer, squinting at the small figure. In her hands, barely visible in the corner of the frame, is an object, flat, rectangular, perhaps 8 or 9 inches across. At this magnification, he can just make out patterns on its surface, shapes, symbols, carefully arranged pieces. What are you playing with? Marcus whispers to the image. He reaches for his high-resolution scanner. What he's about to discover will keep him awake for 3 days straight. In historical photograph analysis, the devil is in the details, a shadow, a reflection, an object barely visible in the background. These tiny elements can reveal truths the photograph's subjects never intended to preserve. Marcus runs the daguerreotype through his laboratory-grade scanner at 1200 dpi. The machine hums softly as it captures every microscopic detail of the 150-year-old image. 20 minutes later, the file loads on his computer screen. He zooms in on the child in the corner. The image pixelates, then sharpens as the software processes the enhancement. Her face comes into focus, round cheeks, hair pulled back with a ribbon, a small hand reaching down toward the object in her lap. Marcus increases magnification, 200%, 300%. The object begins to reveal itself. It's made of wood, light-colored, possibly pine or maple, worn smooth by small hands. The surface is divided into sections, interlocking pieces like a puzzle. But these aren't the simple shapes meant to teach children about animals or letters. Each piece bears something carved into its surface, deliberate markings, symbols. At 400% magnification, Marcus stops breathing. There, carved into the wooden pieces with meticulous precision, are 5-pointed stars, crosses of different sizes, wavy parallel lines, small circles connected by straight lines, triangular markers, and something else, what appear to be tiny letters or numbers, too small to read even at this magnification, scattered throughout the design. Marcus has spent 15 years studying Underground Railroad coding systems. He knows what he's looking at. His hand trembles as he reaches for his reference materials, a thick binder filled with documented examples of the symbolic language used by conductors and freedom seekers in the 1850s and 1860s. He flips through page after page, comparing the symbols carved into the wooden puzzle with the verified codes used to mark safe houses, indicate danger, and show routes north. They match perfectly. But that's impossible. The Underground Railroad ceased operations in 1865 when the 13th Amendment was ratified. By 1873, slavery was over. The network of safe houses and secret routes that had guided thousands to freedom had been disbanded, its participants finally able to speak openly about their work. So why was a black family in Mississippi in 1873 in possession of what appeared to be an active navigation tool for escaped slaves? Marcus grabs his phone with shaking hands and dials his colleague, Dr. Patricia Foster, at Howard University. She answers on the third ring. "Patricia, drop everything. I need you in my office now." He texts her as well. Dr. Patricia Foster is one of the nation's leading experts on Reconstruction-era resistance movements. She has spent 20 years documenting the violence, oppression, and systematic re-enslavement of Black Americans in the decades following the Civil War. When Marcus Reed calls her at midnight with urgency in his voice, she knows he's found something significant. Patricia arrives at Georgetown's history department at 7 a.m. the next morning, carrying 2 bankers' boxes filled with archival documents and a laptop loaded with databases most historians don't even know exist. Marcus meets her at the door, looking like he hasn't slept. "Show me," she says simply. Marcus leads her to his office, where the enhanced image fills a large monitor on the wall. Patricia sets down her boxes and steps closer to the screen, her eyes narrowing as she studies the photograph. Marcus doesn't say anything. He lets her observe, knowing she'll see what he saw. It takes her less than 30 seconds. "That's a map," she says quietly. Her voice carries absolute certainty. "Those are safe house markers, river crossings, church sanctuaries." She points to specific symbols on the wooden puzzle. "This star pattern here, 5 points with a cross in the center, that's the code for sanctuary available, clergy protection. And these wavy lines with dots indicate ferry crossings where operators could be bribed or trusted." She turns to Marcus, her expression grave. "Where did you get this?" "Estate sale, Philadelphia. The woman who owned it died at 103, no living relatives." Marcus pulls up his preliminary research on his laptop. "I spent all night trying to identify the family. The photographer's mark says Natchez, Mississippi, May 1873. Patricia's eyes widen. Natchez. She moves to the boxes she brought and starts pulling out files. Marcus, do you know what was happening in Mississippi in 1873? Black codes, convict leasing, vagrancy laws. Exactly. Patricia spreads documents across Marcus's desk, newspaper clippings, court records, testimonies from congressional hearings. The state was essentially re-enslaving freed people through legal loopholes. If you were black and unemployed, you could be arrested for vagrancy. If you couldn't pay the fine, and they made sure you couldn't, you were leased to plantations as convict labor. She taps one document in particular. Between 1870 and 1875, over 10,000 black people in Mississippi were arrested under these laws. Most never came home. Marcus stares at the photograph on the screen. So the Underground Railroad didn't stop. It couldn't stop, Patricia says. The war ended, but the fight for freedom never did. In historical investigation, names are everything. They unlock census records, property deeds, court documents, newspaper archives. They transform anonymous faces in photographs into real people with real stories. The question is, who was this family, and why did they possess something so dangerous? Patricia opens her laptop and connects to the Library of Congress digital archives. Her fingers fly across the keyboard as she cross-references the photographer's studio information with census data from Natchez, Mississippi, in the 1870s. J. Thompson Studio operated in Natchez from 1868 to 1881, she says, reading from the screen. He specialized in formal portraits for wealthy families. His client list was predominantly white planters and merchants, but, she pauses, scrolling through records, he did photograph several prominent black families during Reconstruction. That alone tells us something important. Marcus leans over her shoulder. What do you mean? To afford a formal portrait at Thompson Studio cost about $15, equivalent to roughly $400 today. For a black family to have that kind of disposable income in Mississippi in 1873, they had to be extraordinary. Patricia switches databases, pulling up property tax records from Adams County, where Natchez is located. She filters by race, year, and property value. The list is shockingly short. There, she says, pointing at the screen. Thomas and Elizabeth Preston owned a two-story brick home on Commerce Street, assessed value $3,200. They also owned a dry goods store on Main Street, and, she clicks another link, they had accounts with 3 different banks. That's not just wealthy, Marcus, that's powerful. Marcus pulls up a parallel search on his own computer, looking for any mentions of the Preston name in historical newspapers from the period, the Natchez Democrat, the Natchez Courier, the New Orleans Times. He searches them all. What he finds makes his stomach tighten. Patricia, look at this. He turns his monitor toward her. On the screen is a newspaper article from the Natchez Democrat dated August 1873, 3 months after the photograph was taken. The headline reads, Negro Merchant's Home Raided, Weapons Seized. The article is brief, written with the casual racism typical of the era, but the details are clear. On the night of August 14th, a group of white citizens led by a deputy sheriff raided the home of Thomas Preston, claiming they had received reports of illegal weapons being stored on the property. No weapons were found, but the message had been sent. They were being watched, Patricia whispers. The photograph wasn't taken in secret. It was taken in defiance. To understand why the Preston family would risk everything to operate an underground network in 1873, we must understand the system they were fighting. Slavery didn't end with the 13th Amendment. It evolved. Patricia stands and walks to the whiteboard mounted on Marcus's office wall. She uncaps a marker and begins writing dates, connecting them with arrows. Most people think slavery ended on January 1, 1863, with the Emancipation Proclamation, or December 6, 1865, when the 13th Amendment was ratified. She begins, her voice taking on the cadence of a practiced lecturer. But the 13th Amendment contains 27 words that changed everything. She writes on the board, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. Except as punishment for crime, Marcus reads aloud. The loophole. Exactly. Patricia circles those 6 words. Southern states immediately exploited it. They passed black codes, laws specifically designed to criminalize black life. Vagrancy, loitering, being unemployed, breaking a labor contract, even insulting gestures could get you arrested. She pulls documents from her boxes and spreads them on the desk, court records, ledgers, contracts between state governments and private businesses. Once arrested, you'd be fined an amount you couldn't possibly pay. Then the state would lease you to plantations, railroads, mines, factories. The businesses paid the state, you worked for free. And unlike slavery before the war, there was no incentive to keep you alive and healthy. You were temporary, disposable. Marcus examines the documents. One is a ledger from a Mississippi cotton plantation dated 1872. It lists names, all black men, alongside numbers indicating days worked and causes of death, exhaustion, dysentery, pneumonia, shot while attempting escape. The average survival time was less than 7 months. In Mississippi alone, Patricia continues, between 1870 and 1880, over 15,000 people were caught in the system. Families were destroyed. Children grew up never knowing their fathers. Women were left with no means of support and were often arrested themselves for vagrancy. She turns back to the photograph of the Preston family displayed on the screen. Now look at this image again. This family somehow escaped that system. They built wealth. They created safety. And judging by that map and that little girl's hands, they were helping others escape, too. Marcus stares at the photograph with new eyes. They weren't just survivors, they were resistance fighters. In the middle of enemy territory, Patricia adds quietly, operating in plain sight. The coded map in the child's hands contains information that, in 1873, could have gotten the entire family killed. But codes are meant to be broken. And after 150 years, these historians are determined to read the message hidden in plain sight. Marcus and Patricia spend the next 6 hours meticulously documenting every symbol visible on the wooden puzzle. Using photo enhancement software, Marcus isolates each carved marking, catalogs it, and compares it against known Underground Railroad coding systems from the 1850s and 1860s. The symbols are consistent with traditional codes, Marcus says, pointing at his screen. But the geography is different. These aren't routes leading to Canada. Look at the directional indicators. Patricia studies the arrangement. The puzzle pieces, when fitted together properly, form a rough map of what appears to be a 50-mile radius. Wavy lines indicate rivers, likely the Mississippi River and its tributaries. Small circles mark towns or settlements. And scattered throughout are the stars, crosses, and geometric shapes that indicate safe locations. They're not running people to Canada, Patricia says slowly, realization dawning. They're running them to cities, Memphis, St. Louis, New Orleans, places where they could disappear into established black communities. Marcus pulls up a historical map of Mississippi from 1873 and overlays it on his screen next to the enhanced photograph of the puzzle. He begins matching landmarks. This large triangle here, that could be the confluence where the Homachito River meets the Mississippi. And these 3 stars in a row, he zooms in on a modern map, That's the exact distance between 3 churches that still exist in Natchez today. All of them were established black congregations in the 1860s. Patricia is making notes rapidly. The system makes sense now. Convict leasing victims were held on plantations and in work camps. The Preston network wasn't smuggling people across state lines. They were extracting them from forced labor sites and hiding them in cities where they could get new identities, new papers, new lives. But how? Marcus asks. These camps were guarded. Escape attempts were punishable by death. Patricia points to another symbol on the map, a small square with an X through it. This marking, I've seen it in other documents. It indicates a bribed official, someone on the inside. They exchange a long look. The Prestons weren't working alone, Marcus says. This was a network, multiple families, possibly dozens of people, all risking everything. And all hidden from history, Patricia adds, until now. Natchez, Mississippi, in 1873 was a city of contradictions. Built on the wealth of slavery, it struggled to adapt to a world where that system was officially illegal. For black residents who had achieved success, every day was a careful balance between visibility and danger. With the Preston family identified and the map partially decoded, Marcus and Patricia need to understand the specific context of Natchez during this period. Patricia contacts a colleague at the University of Mississippi who specializes in local Reconstruction history. Dr. James Whitmore arrives 2 days later with an archive of materials that has never been digitized. Tucked inside a leather portfolio are handwritten letters, property records, and something particularly valuable, a diary kept by a white merchant who lived 2 blocks from the Preston store. This diary is fascinating, Dr. Whitmore says, carefully turning the brittle pages. The author, a man named Charles Dutton, wrote daily entries from 1871 to 1876. He mentions the Prestons repeatedly, and his tone is conflicted. He opens to a page marked with a paper clip and reads aloud, May 18, 1873. Purchased fabric from Preston store today. The Negro proprietor, Thomas, conducted business with the same dignity as any white merchant. His wife, Elizabeth, keeps immaculate records. Their success is both impressive and unsettling. One wonders how they accumulated such wealth in so short a time, Marcus leans forward. That's the same month the photograph was taken. Dr. Whitmore nods. It gets more interesting. He flips ahead several pages. August 20th, 1873. There was a disturbance at the Preston home last night. Sheriff Clayton led a group of men on some pretense of searching for weapons. Nothing was found. Thomas Preston stood on his porch and watched them search, never saying a word, never showing fear. I admit I felt ashamed watching it. These are law-abiding citizens being harassed for the crime of prosperity, *. Patricia examines the diary more closely. This Charles Dutton, whose side was he on? That's unclear, Dr. Whitmore admits. His writing suggests he was uncomfortable with the violence against black citizens, but he never actively intervened. He observed, he documented, but he didn't act. Marcus returns to the photograph on the screen. So when this picture was taken in May, the Preston family already knew they were being watched. They knew the danger they were in. And yet they still posed for this portrait with that map visible in their daughter's hands. It wasn't carelessness, Patricia says quietly. It was courage. They were documenting their resistance. They wanted someone, someday, to know what they did. Every person in the photograph has a story, but sometimes the smallest figure holds the biggest secret. The child playing with a coded map wasn't just a casual bystander, she was part of the operation. Using the Preston family name, Patricia dives deeper into census records and church registries. She finds the family listed in the 1870 census: Thomas Preston, age 38, merchant; Elizabeth Preston, age 35, homemaker; 3 older children: William, 16, Josephine, 14, and Henry, 12, and 2 younger children, Clara, 7, and Ruth, 3. Ruth, Patricia says, pointing at the name, born in 1870. She'd be 4 years old in the photograph. That's our girl. Marcus studies the enhanced image of the child. She's so small. Why would they give a 4-year-old something so dangerous? Maybe they didn't give it to her, Patricia suggests. Maybe it was always meant to look exactly like what it appears to be, a child's puzzle, something innocent that could be left out in the open without raising suspicion. Dr. Whitmore, still examining the diary, finds another relevant entry. Listen to this, June 3, 1873. Saw the Preston child, the youngest daughter, playing in their garden today. She had a wooden toy that seemed to captivate her completely. When I commented on it to my wife, she remarked that Elizabeth Preston had mentioned teaching her children through educational toys. Perhaps that is how these Negroes achieve such refinement. The puzzle was seen by neighbors, Marcus says. It was visible, public, and no one suspected what it really was. Patricia pulls up birth and death records, tracking the Preston children through the decades. William moved to Chicago in 1895. Josephine married and moved to Memphis in 1890. Henry died in 1889 of pneumonia. Clara married a railroad worker and settled in St. Louis. And Ruth? This is strange, Patricia says, frowning at her screen. Ruth Preston appears in the 1880 census, page 10, still living with her parents in Natchez, but after that, nothing. No marriage record, no death certificate. She just disappears from official records. Marcus meets her eyes. People don't just vanish. They do, Patricia says quietly, if they need to. If they're running from something, or if they're part of something so secret that they have to erase themselves from history to survive. The little girl in the photograph stares out at them from 150 years in the past, her small hands holding a secret that could change everything. August 14, 1873. 3 months after the photograph was taken, the safety the Preston family had carefully constructed came crashing down. What happened that night would test everything they had built and reveal just how far they were willing to go to protect their network. Dr. Whitmore finds the official report of the raid in the Adams County Sheriff's records. The document is brief, clinical, written to justify the violation of the Preston's home, but between the lines, a different story emerges. The raid was led by Deputy Sheriff Robert Clayton, accompanied by 6 men identified as concerned citizens. They arrived at the Preston home at approximately 10 p.m., claiming they had received information about illegal weapons being stored on the property. But here's what's interesting, Dr. Whitmore says, pulling up another document. 3 days before the raid, a man named Jacob Henderson was arrested for vagrancy in Adams County. He was sentenced to 6 months' labor at Fairview Plantation. Marcus and Patricia exchange glances. Fairview Plantation is marked on the map, Marcus says, pointing to one of the symbols on the puzzle. That circle with the cross inside it. Exactly, Dr. Whitmore confirms. According to plantation records I found, Jacob Henderson escaped from Fairview on August 12, 2 days before the raid on the Preston house. He was never recaptured. The pieces fall into place. The Prestons had helped Henderson escape. Someone had informed the authorities, and the raid was retaliation, a warning, an attempt to find evidence of the network's activities. But the raiders found nothing, no weapons, no hidden rooms, no evidence of harboring escaped convicts. Thomas Preston stood on his porch and watched in silence as strangers ransacked his elegant home, tearing through closets, emptying drawers, looking for proof of crimes he had absolutely committed but hidden too well for them to find. The map, Patricia says suddenly. Where was the map during the raid? They return to the photograph, studying the little girl with the wooden puzzle. Ruth was 4 years old, Marcus says slowly, too young to be suspicious, too innocent to question. If anyone asked what she was playing with, her parents could truthfully say it was just a toy. The perfect hiding place, Patricia adds, right out in the open, in the hands of a child. The raid failed. The Preston family survived. And somewhere in the night of August 12, 1873, Jacob Henderson started a new life in a northern city, guided by a map hidden in plain sight. The story of the Preston family and their coded map doesn't end in 1873. It echoes forward through generations, a testament to courage that history tried to erase. But now, 150 years later, that silence is finally broken. Marcus and Patricia spend 3 more months researching, verifying, cross-referencing every detail. They discover that the Preston network operated for at least 7 years, from approximately 1870 to 1877, when federal troops withdrew from the South and Reconstruction officially ended. During that time, based on fragmentary records and coded references in letters, they estimate the network helped between 150 and 200 people escape convict leasing. The coded puzzle was likely one of several tools the Prestons used. Patricia finds references in church records to educational materials being distributed to black families throughout the region, possibly other maps disguised as children's toys, primers, or games. Thomas Preston died in 1891, still operating his store in Natchez. Elizabeth lived until 1903. Of their children, only Ruth's fate remains mysterious. The last confirmed record of her is from 1879, when she would have been 9 years old. I think she took the network underground, Patricia theorizes. As Reconstruction collapsed and violence increased, someone had to carry on the work. It couldn't be the parents, they were too visible, too watched. But a young woman traveling alone could move freely, could carry messages, could maintain the connections. They'll never know for certain, but the photograph tells them enough. In December 2023, Marcus and Patricia present their findings at the American Historical Association conference. The photograph is projected on a large screen, and for the first time, hundreds of historians see what that little girl was holding in her hands. The room falls silent as Patricia explains the symbols, the dates, the context. When she finishes, the applause lasts for 3 full minutes. The photograph is now housed at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. Visitors stop in front of it daily, studying the elegant parlor, the dignified family, and especially the small girl in the corner playing with her wooden puzzle. Next to the photograph, a placard reads, ** The Preston Family, Natchez, Mississippi, 1873. Underground Railroad Operators. When freedom was stolen through law, they built new roads to return it. ** The little girl stares out from history, clutching her secret. For 150 years, no one knew what she was protecting. Now, finally, the world understands. The fight for freedom never ended. It just went underground. And sometimes, the most dangerous weapons look like children's toys.